A bank issued stablecoin is still just as surveillable and programmable as like a hypothetical CBDC would be. But this one-to-one reserve thing is a big problem for them because the bank's they want to keep their casino going. They need fractional reserve stuff to follow their existing business model. They have no intention of changing that. And it's, when you keep in mind too, that like in the States specifically,
Hey guys, welcome back to Everyday Finance. In this video, Whitney Webb discuss about Bitcoin ETF and banks, according to Whitney Webb. Commercial banks like JP Morgan want to be the ones that by giving out dollar-pick stable coins, whatever safe coins, or deposit tokens, they want to take you. They don't want these other companies to do what they want to do, like the people at Tether and Payo. That makes perfect sense. And these are the same ones you know from a bank. The released stablecoin can still be hacked and watched just like a made-up CBDC would be. But this one is different. They have a lot of trouble with the tone reserve because the banks won't let them. They want to keep their casino open. They need fractional reserve stuff to keep doing business the way they do now, and they have no plans to change that. And it's also important to remember that the central bank in the United States is privately owned of the Wall Street banks, as if they were going to clearly tell the central bank what to do about digital dollars, and lots of things Whitney Webb discuss, so please watch the video to end. And share this video and subscribe our channel Everyday Finance. Thanks.
The reason Jamie Dimon was with Elizabeth Warren was we should ban all crypto. If I was the government, I would do that. That's because the commercial banks like JP Morgan want to be the entities issuing the dollar peg stable coins or the whatever stable coins or deposit tokens. They want to take, the Tether crowd and Paolo and all of those guys. They want to do it. They don't want these other companies to do it.
Yeah, which makes complete sense.
And these same, a bank issued stablecoin is still just as surveillable and programmable as like a hypothetical CBDC would be. But this one-to-one reserve thing is a big problem for them because the bank's they want to keep their casino going. They need fractional reserve stuff to follow their existing business model. They have no intention of changing that. And it's, when you keep in mind too, that in the States specifically, the central bank is owned by the Wall Street banks. They're going to direct, obviously, what the central bank policy will be with respect to digital dollars, right? So, there's a reason why I think the Fed has been so, unwilling to be yeah, we're going to do a CBDC. They've been very we don't know, we're not looking at it, and there's people that have taken that as a sign that, the Fed is fighting against CBDCs, right? But not so. It's just one that's issued by, the people that we definitely know steal from. It's just a different group of thieves in charge of programming and surveilling. But they, are obviously going to collaborate with the government. It's going to be a public-private partnership, essentially. And Fed now, there might be an actual direct issue CBDC, but that'll probably be for interbank settlement or something like that.
Right.
It's not going to be what the public interacts with. Well, I was just going to say, I think there's even more stuff to be cognizant of. Remember, the DOJ holds an insane amount of Bitcoin, and that's probably only going to increase. So with Binance, a ton of DOJ people have access not just to every transaction on that exchange from now going forward, but also everything in the past. What happens if they flag past transactions and retroactively start seizing wallets? Right. Mm-hmm. They could do that. And I think with a lot of this stuff that I've been warning about for a long time, but we've seen it escalate a lot since October 7th, this claim that Bitcoin specifically is being used to finance terrorism. And you're having these pushes, to regulate based on that, under a national security justification. I think that's a recipe for even more DOJ seizures, specifically of Bitcoin. And so, why is the DOJ so interested in it's a major arm of the US government. So the US government more broadly interested in accumulating so much Bitcoin and holding onto it. And also basically creating national security justifications to literally take anyone's Bitcoin they could possibly want under a variety of insanely vague metrics. like I've talked about before, the DOJ is part of this WEF organization that wants to label people who are accused of publishing misinformation online as cyber criminals and cyber terrorism who should have their domains and assets seized. Yeah, I know. I mean, obviously, that's like everybody here. The DOJ could eventually, it's a really broad net, but why are they setting that system up? You know what I mean? And I think it's important to keep in mind, too, that, like Gary Gensler of the SEC has made it clear very consistently for a while now that Bitcoin is the only digital currency viewed from the SEC's perspective as a commodity. Everything else is a security to Gary Gensler. So they're going to, that's a pretty unique status. They want to treat it as a commodity as they move everything into the digital currency space. And they have plans to do that and use it for their benefit. And to think they wouldn't do that is I think personally really naive.
According to Whitney Webb, someone makes a tool to really hit commercial and government banks and stop them from doing bad things. They can take it over and make it a part of their system, and they're to commit fraud and help them do it. They will definitely do that. It's not like they'll say, oh, you invented Bitcoin, you got us. Even more things should be kept in mind, like the fact that the DOJ holds a crazy amount of Bitcoin, and that number is probably only going to go up. So with Binance, a lot of Doge people can see not only every trade, but also all of them on that exchange from now on. But also for everything that happened in the past. If they flag it, they could go back and seize wallets that had already been used and Whitney think a lot of this stuff that she have been for a long time. But since October 7th, things have gotten a lot worse with this claim that Bitcoin it's being used to pay for terrorism, and there are calls to control it because of this in the name of national security. To do that seems like a good way to make even more Doge-style captures of Bitcoin. Let's back to the Whitney Webb interview.
That's a pretty good question. Well, I mean, so basically, in this article, it focuses on this particular network that Fluent Finance, which was partnered with, this SBF Deltec thing. They're sort of in this network with like the XDC network and R3, right? And R3 is developing CBDCs all over the world, but they also have they're casting a wider net than just CBDCs. They have this thing called the Digital Currency Accelerator, and they're basically focusing on not just CBDCs, but deposit tokens and stablecoins. So like any entity, banks, central banks, whatever, can sandbox and test out their digital currency and add programmability and all this stuff that people are concerned about when it comes to CBDCs as it relates to impacts on individual freedoms, specifically financial freedoms, right? So they've created all these tools to make it happen really fast. The question is, I think at the end of the day, trust and adoption. And so what I've sort of brought up on some recent interviews is this stuff I've been writing about since 2021, how the biggest banks in the world and the biggest central bank, some of the most important central banks in the world, in this WEF partnership and the Carnegie Endowment, which at the time was run by the current CIA director, were basically gaming out financial cyber attacks on the financial system. And a lot of people don't know this, but the entire financial services industry in the US, so all of the big banks, have an ISAC, which is an information sharing and analysis center, where their CISOs all get together privately and game out threats to the system and how to respond to them. So all the Wall Street banks have had since 2021 a unified plan about what they'll do if there's a big cyber attack on the banks. And so if you're the biggest bank, these same banks that caused 2008, and that there another banking crisis and economic calamity is inevitable, and you don't want to be blamed by people when they're angry about their money not really having value anymore. How do you get around that? I don't think they want a repeat of Occupy Wall Street. I think that's pretty clear, right? So how do you, get around that? Well, you're these faceless hackers took over the financial system and we have to relaunch it with these things because it's more secure and, we'll know who everybody is, because there's this parallel push to end online anonymity and financial privacy going on here, which is part of this whole like narrative too about like Bitcoin and, you know, financing terror transactions and stuff. Like it's all about like KYC and like linking your digital ID and government issued ID to, you know, every transaction, having even the smallest transaction, $1, 50 cents, you know, is surveillable by the banks and the government. Right. So people aren't just going to be like, yeah, let's do that system if they launch it without some sort of event that causes, you know, fear and panic. So I think it's likely it'll get rolled into some sort of like Cyber Patriot Act after some sort of mass cyber event that the banks have all gamed out. And the WEF, which runs this partnership, the banks and all these intelligence agencies are a part of, say it is going to happen before January 2025.
Whitney Webb think it's important to remember that for a while now, Gary Gensler of the SEC has made it very clear that Bitcoin is the only way to buy things. Cryptocurrency is seen as a good by the SEC. But Gary Gensler thinks of everything else as a protection. They want to treat it like a commodity as they move everything into digital cash, which is a pretty unique situation. They want to take over space and use it for their own gain. And Whitney Webb think it's really stupid to think they wouldn't do that. Of course they would get. If you learned something from this video, then please like this video and subscribe our channel Everyday Finance, and we will meet in next video. Thanks.